In what military analysts are calling one of the most intense undersea standoffs since the Cold War, US and NATO naval forces reportedly engaged in a 48-hour anti-submarine warfare operation in the North Atlantic after detecting multiple Russian submarines operating unusually close to the USS Gerald R. carrier strike group. For decades, the North Atlantic has served as a critical maritime corridor linking North America and Europe. The U.S. Navy's presence there ensures the security of transatlantic shipping routes, a mission dating back to the early Cold War. In the 2025 encounter, the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's newest and most advanced aircraft carrier, was conducting standard operations alongside its escort ships, which were 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and several support vessels. During this time, a circling aircraft picked up sonar contact that showed the presence of multiple submarines. The U.S. was shocked when they realized that these unknown submarines belonged to Russia's Northern Fleet, which had been ordered to close with the Americans and collect everything. According to experts, the objective of the Russian submarines was to gather intelligence, like monitor acoustic signatures, formation patterns, and radar emissions. All of these are valuable data for assessing NATO carrier strike group operations. Once the contacts were confirmed, the Ford's Combat Information Center quickly assessed the situation. Within seconds, the data was automatically shared across NATO's SecureLink 16 system, an integrated system that enables real-time information sharing among allied ships, aircraft, and submarines. That instant coordination set in motion a large-scale anti-submarine warfare operation that involved multiple NATO partners. A British Type 23 frigate redirected its course south at high speed, while 8 P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft were scrambled from bases across Scotland, Norway, and Iceland. Each Poseidon, a heavily modified Boeing 737 designed for submarine hunting, is equipped with advanced sensors capable of detecting submarines from hundreds of meters below the surface. At the same time, a U.S. Virginia-class attack submarine that had actually been shadowing the Russian vessels for several days was cleared to make its presence felt, adding another layer of surveillance to the operation. By mid-afternoon, NATO's maritime domain awareness had transformed from curiosity to full-blown pursuit. The Russian submarines, realizing they had been detected, tried to maneuver straight out of the World War II playbook. One submarine ascended to create noise and distract sensors while the others dove deeper to slip away quietly. But such tactics no longer work against modern NATO sonar processing systems. The alliance's advanced acoustic technology can distinguish subtle differences in sound signatures, allowing operators to tell apart a noisy decoy and the low hum of a genuine submarine. The operation soon escalated into what observers have called an acoustic storm. NATO aircraft began deploying dozens of sonobuoys, which were floating sensors that detect underwater movement and transmit data back to aircraft. These devices, when activated, emit sonar pings exceeding 140 decibels, and it blanketed the area in sound and made stealth nearly impossible. The Russian crews reportedly endured an overwhelming acoustic barrage, with constant sonar pings reverberating through their submarines. Meanwhile, surface ships joined in. The Arleigh Burke destroyers activated their blow-mounted sonar arrays and towed hydrophones, further tightening the net. The combination of airborne, surface, and subsurface tracking created a situation where every Russian move could be traced, logged, and countered. Adding to the pressure, NATO aircraft conducted simulated attack runs, diving toward the ocean as if preparing to drop torpedoes. Although no live weapons were released, the psychological toll of the Russian crews was immense. Each maneuver forced them into evasive action, burning precious energy reserves and generating even more detectable noise. Over the following 24 hours, NATO's ASW units executed precise coordination. The airspace was divided into controlled zones to avoid collisions between aircraft from different nations. American Poseidons operated between 20,000 and 25,000 feet, while helicopters flew at low altitude, each assigned specific patrol boxes. To confuse their pursuers, the Russian submarines launched acoustic decoys, which were devices designed to mimic submarine sounds and lure torpedoes away. However, NATO's computers classified these decoys within fractions of a second. The alliance maintained tracking on all 3 submarines. British vessels deployed their advanced Type 2087 towed array sonar, while US MH-60R Romeo helicopters hovered overhead, lowering dipping sonar systems to penetrate ocean thermoclines. This tactic was also useless against NATO's technology. Amid all the chaos, one American submarine, a Virginia-class attack submarine, maintained a silent, patient pursuit. Running on electric propulsion and equipped with a TB-34 towed sonar array, it tracked the Russian submarines for the entire 48-hour engagement without being detected. At one point, the U.S. sub even sent a brief active sonar pulse, which was a subtle signal intended to remind the Russian crews that they were not alone. But as Russia spied on the U.S. Navy, you won't believe what happened next. They spent 2 days of relentless tracking, sleep deprivation, and unsuccessful evasive maneuvers when the Russian submarines had to retreat toward the Barents Sea. But that wasn't the end. NATO aircraft followed at a respectful distance, maintaining surveillance until the vessels left the area, and they were sure that Russia wouldn't pose any more risks. Although Russia was trying to spy on the US, NATO forces ended up benefiting more. They had collected an extensive library of acoustic data. Every noise, from pumps to propulsion systems, was recorded and analyzed, effectively creating an acoustic fingerprint for each submarine. So it would be hard for Russia to get this close again. But Moscow is claiming that the mission was a successful reconnaissance operation. Russia has been making efforts to learn more about the US through their espionage efforts. But their weapons aren't as advanced as the US, as seen in this failed attempt to spy on the US Navy. In fact, tensions between the two countries reached another height when the NATO chief mocked Russia's submarines. In a rare public jab, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte mocked Russia's handling of one of its own submarines, calling it limping and broken, even as Moscow insisted that the vessel was merely executing routine movements. Russian officials are claiming that the diesel-powered submarine Novorossiysk surfaced in the English Channel as part of a scheduled interfleet transit following operations in the Mediterranean. The Kremlin denied any form of mechanical failure, rejecting claims that the submarine was forced to surface by a malfunction. But the facts tell a more intriguing story. Dutch defense authorities say the Novorossiysk was being towed through the North Sea, accompanied by a Russian tugboat called Yakov Grabelski. NATO released satellite or surface imagery reportedly showing the sub on the surface off Brittany, observed by a French frigate. Meanwhile, intelligence-style sources close to Russian security circles claim the submarine suffered a fuel leak in its hold, which could raise explosion risks. It was in this context that Rutte took to the podium in Slovenia to deliver a moment of barbed political theater. "There's a lone and broken Russian submarine limping home from patrol," he quipped. Rutte's comments carry deep implications, revealing Russia's dwindling maritime presence in the Mediterranean and beyond. This message was basically showing that Russia's current military state is in disarray, especially their navy. Despite this, Russia hasn't stopped trying to spy on the US Navy. In late March 2025, a tense aerial encounter unfolded above the Pacific, and it was one that quickly made waves across defense circles and social media alike. A Russian Il-38N Dolphin maritime patrol aircraft executed a low-altitude pass close to the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. The reaction was sharp and immediate, with the U.S. Navy F-35C and F/A-18 fighters launching to escort and intercept the intruding aircraft. The footage released by a sailor on the Carl Vinson captured the dramatic moment the Il-38N buzzed the carrier with the U.S. fighters shadowing it in formation. The Russian aircraft was intercepted and escorted away, and the Navy described the interaction as safe and professional. It seems like the carrier was in the Sea of Japan, participating in trilateral naval exercises with Japan and South Korea from March 17th to 20th, before heading toward Guam. The Il-38N is an upgraded version of the older Soviet-era Il-38, modified with the Novella P-38 surveillance suite. Its typical role means that it can patrol vast sea expanses, drop sonobuoys, and use magnetic anomaly detection equipment and relay tracking data to naval assets. The low-altitude pass near a carrier is especially provocative, given how vulnerable such aircraft are during low-level flight, especially near powerful U.S. naval assets. From the American side, the presence of the F-35C, Lightning II, and F/A-18 Super Hornet jets shows their dual-pronged intercept approach, which gives them an edge over Russia. Russia is trying to reasset its reach in the Indo-Pacific and remind the world that it can shadow U.S. assets. But the U.S. continues to focus on readiness, deterrence, and control. Russia, spying on the U.S. Navy, always involves testing the rules of engagement, like sending the aircraft close, monitoring reactions, and then gathering data on the Navy's signals. But the problem is that the Pacific is already a hotbed of strategic competition involving China, and is drawing secondary fronts like these U.S.-Russia aerial encounters. Just a month after the U.S. Navy jets intercepted a Russian Dolphin patrol aircraft, and a Russian signals intelligence vessel was tracked entering the Mediterranean. In April 2025, the Russian signals intelligence vessel, Viktor Leonov, Project 864 Vishnya class, was detected transiting through the Strait of Gibraltar and entering the Mediterranean, amid heightened scrutiny of Russian naval intelligence operations in European waters. Tracking sources observed the ship passing through Gibraltar on April 14, 2025, moving eastbound, shortly after the departure of another Russian surveillance vessel, Kilden. Spanish naval elements also shadowed the Leonov through patrol vessel P-45 Audaz, maintaining visual contact during its entry. The deployment underscores a renewed Russian effort to resume maritime intelligence operations in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, earlier in April, Ireland's defense forces monitored the same vessel for over 36 hours as it transited Ireland's exclusive economic zone. Naval service ship L.E. Samuel Beckett tracked the Leonov with support from Irish Air Corps maritime patrol aircraft. The ship acknowledged receipt of communication hails, but refused further interaction or disclosure of intent. It didn't exactly enter Ireland's territorial waters, but it remained within the EEZ before eventually departing. According to Irish officials, the Viktor Leonov was formally declared a vessel of interest. Tánaiste and Defense Minister Simon Harris confirmed that the defense forces maintained close observation during its transit, stating that such vessels occasionally enter Irish maritime zones and that monitoring by state forces is ongoing. It seems like the next point for this Russia spy ship is Cuba, a known route for Russian intelligence operations. The Viktor Leonov is specifically designed for signals intelligence and communications interception, with suites of antennas and electronic systems meant to monitor radar, radio, and electromagnetic emissions over wide maritime areas. It also holds the capacity for underwater monitoring of subsea infrastructure, raising concerns about shadowing data cables or submarine activity. Russia's attempts to spy on the U.S. Navy continues to fail, and the world is watching to see what its next move would be. What do you think would happen next in the push and pull between the two countries? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on global military events.